What if the reason your life feels stuck isn't lack of talent, luck, or time, but a system you never chose and never questioned? What if 7 days from now you could look in the mirror and recognize discipline, clarity, and quiet confidence staring back at you? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people wait for motivation. Winners build systems, and systems don't care how you feel. They work when you're tired, confused, or afraid. That's why transformation doesn't start with hype. It starts with structure. In the next week, you won't become someone new by wishing harder. You become unrecognizable by doing small, deliberate things consistently, even when no one is watching. Let me pull you closer for a moment. Imagine waking up each morning knowing exactly what matters, exactly what comes next, and exactly why you refuse to quit. No chaos, no noise, just direction. That feeling doesn't come from confidence. Confidence comes from keeping promises to yourself. And that begins today. Here's the hook you didn't expect. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Goals are moments. Systems are identities. When your system changes, your identity follows. And when identity shifts, behavior becomes automatic. That's how 1 week can change everything. Think of the pilot who doesn't rely on emotion to land a plane in a storm. Think of the leader who shows up calm when everyone else panics. They don't ask, do I feel like it? They ask, what does the system require now? That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. This week is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters on purpose. Strip your life down to essentials. 1 clear priority per day. 1 non-negotiable action. 1 promise you will keep no matter how you feel. That's how trust with yourself is built. By the end of these 7 days, people won't notice what you're doing differently. They'll notice how you show up. Quieter, sharper, grounded. And that's the most dangerous kind of change. Because once you prove to yourself that you can design your behavior, you never go back to excuses again. I once watched someone transform without applause. No announcement, no countdown. Just a notebook, an alarm, and a decision to honor 1 habit daily. After a week, nothing external changed, yet everything internal did. Posture shifted, voice slowed, choices sharpened. That is the power you are about to borrow. Not borrowed from anyone else, but reclaimed from the version of you that already knows how to lead, starting right now today. Before anything changes on the outside, something must shift on the inside, and that shift begins with honesty. Brutal honesty, because if you lie to yourself about where you are, every plan you make is built on sand. So let me ask you something most people avoid. Are you busy or are you effective? Because those are not the same thing, and confusing them is why so many people stay exhausted yet unchanged. Here's the truth most won't tell you. You don't need more time. You need clearer standards. Time is neutral. Standards decide how time is used. When standards are low, distractions feel acceptable. When standards are high, distractions feel expensive. Transformation in 1 week doesn't come from adding tasks. It comes from removing tolerance for what drains you. Think about this. Every system works perfectly for the results it produces. If your life feels scattered, the system is working. If you feel inconsistent, the system is working. The problem isn't you. The problem is the system you've been following by default. And the moment you see that, blame disappears and responsibility appears. Let me tell you a short story. There was someone who said they wanted change, but every morning began the same way, phone first, mind scattered, energy borrowed instead of built. Nothing was technically wrong, yet everything felt off. One day, nothing dramatic happened. They simply changed the first 10 minutes of their morning. No phone, just silence and intention. That tiny shift didn't feel powerful, but it was, because it signaled leadership. And leadership is not about control over others. It's about control over the first decision of the day. This week, you don't need willpower, you need design. Decide in advance what you will do when resistance shows up, because it will. Motivation is unreliable. Systems are loyal. When you design your day before emotions arrive, emotions lose their authority. Here's a principle that changes everything. Clarity creates calm. When you know why something matters, stress decreases. When you don't, everything feels heavy. So define your why for this week, not in poetic language, but in practical terms. Why does waking up on time matter? Why does finishing 1 task matter? Why does keeping your word to yourself matter? Because each small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. By the end of this section, understand this. You are not trying to fix your life. You are trying to lead it. And leaders don't wait for perfect conditions. They create conditions that make progress inevitable. This is where real transformation quietly begins. Change doesn't collapse your old life all at once. It replaces it quietly, decision by decision, habit by habit. And the third decision you must make this week is about identity, not behavior. Because behavior follows identity every single time. You don't wake up disciplined and then believe you are disciplined. You decide who you are, and your actions rush to support that story. Here's where most people fail. They say, I'll do this until I feel like a different person. That day never comes. The shift happens when you say, this is who I am now, even if my actions feel awkward at first. Identity comes before evidence. That's not motivation. That's leadership. Think of someone who says, I'm the kind of person who keeps their word. That sentence alone changes how choices are made. Skipping doesn't feel harmless anymore. Quitting doesn't feel neutral. It feels out of character. And when something feels out of character, you don't debate it, you reject it. This week, you are not trying to be perfect. You are trying to be consistent with one identity. Choose it carefully. Not something dramatic, something stable. Someone who starts what they commit to. Someone who finishes one thing per day. Someone who doesn't negotiate with excuses. That identity becomes your compass. Let me show you how this works in real life. There was a moment when someone stopped asking, should I work today, and started asking, what does someone like me do next? The question changed everything. It removed emotion from the equation. The answer became obvious. And obvious answers require less energy. Your brain loves alignment. When actions match identity, resistance drops. When they don't, stress increases. That's why discipline feels hard when it's borrowed from motivation, but feels light when it's borrowed from identity. This is also why 1 week matters. 7 days is long enough to prove something to yourself, but short enough that fear doesn't talk you out of starting. Each day you act in alignment, the identity strengthens. Each day you don't, it weakens. There is no neutral. So today, define who you are being for the next 7 days. Write it, say it, live it, not loudly, quietly. Power doesn't announce itself. It shows up consistently. By the end of this week, you won't say you're trying anymore. You'll say, this is just what I do now. And that sentence changes everything forever. The fourth shift is where most people get uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of freedom and replaces it with intention. Structure is not the enemy of creativity. Structure is what makes progress predictable. When your days have no shape, your energy leaks everywhere. When your days have boundaries, your energy sharpens. Let's be honest. If you truly want to change, chaos would no longer be acceptable. Not dramatic chaos, but subtle chaos. Waking up at different times. Deciding what to do only after distractions arrive. Letting moods dictate momentum. None of that feels dangerous, but it quietly steals your future. This week, structure becomes your ally. Not a prison, a framework. You don't need a perfect schedule. You need a repeatable rhythm. Wake, focus, execute, rest. Repeat. When the rhythm is clear, decisions disappear. And when decisions disappear, discipline becomes easier. Here's something powerful to understand. Every decision costs energy. The more decisions you make, the faster you drain. That's why successful people simplify. They don't have more willpower. They have fewer choices. The outfit is decided. The work block is defined. The quitting point is removed. There was someone who struggled every day to start. Not because they were lazy, but because starting required negotiation. One day, they removed negotiation entirely. Same time. Same place, same first task. Suddenly, starting wasn't heroic, it was automatic. That's the power of structure. It turns effort into habit. This week, choose one fixed anchor in your day. One moment that does not move. Maybe it's the first hour of the morning. Maybe it's a focused block in the evening. Protect it like it matters, because it does. That anchor becomes proof that you are in control of your time, not reacting to it. And here's the deeper truth. Structure builds self-respect. When you honor your own schedule, you send yourself a message. I matter. My future matters. My word matters. That message compounds faster than motivation ever could. Some people fear structure because they think it removes freedom. But the opposite is true. Structure creates freedom from chaos, from guilt, from constant catching up. It frees your mind to focus on what actually moves you forward. By the end of this phase, your life will feel quieter, not empty. Clear, less noise. Fewer debates, more action. And when action becomes normal, confidence stops being something you chase. It becomes something you carry. You're not becoming rigid. You're becoming reliable. And reliability is the foundation of every powerful transformation that lasts. Now we talk about resistance, because this is the point where most transformations quietly fail. Not because people don't know what to do, but because discomfort shows up and they misinterpret it as a warning. Resistance is not a stop sign. It is a signal that growth is happening. And if you expect it, it loses its power over you. Here's what no one prepares you for. The moment you commit to change, your mind will try to protect the old identity. It will whisper logical excuses. Rest today, start tomorrow. You've already done enough. That voice is not truth. It is familiarity defending itself. Growth feels unsafe to the brain because it is unknown, not because it is wrong. This week, you must stop asking how you feel and start asking what is required. Feelings are information, not instructions. If a pilot followed feelings during turbulence, no one would land safely. Professionals execute despite internal noise. That's what separates intention from transformation. Let me give you a simple reframe. Discomfort is the price of admission. If it's uncomfortable, you're early. If it's hard, you're doing it right. Easy rarely changes identity. Pressure does. And pressure, when managed, builds strength. There was a moment when someone felt every reason to quit. Tired, uninspired, invisible. Nothing external was rewarding the effort yet. And that's exactly why the effort mattered. Because doing the right thing without applause rewires who you are. Anyone can perform when results are visible. Leaders perform before results exist. This week, you don't need to defeat resistance. You need to outlast it. Resistance is loud at first, then it gets bored. If you keep showing up, it stops negotiating. Consistency trains resistance to leave you alone. Here's a powerful rule. Never decide in the moment. Decide in advance. Decide what you will do when you feel tired. Decide what you will do when you feel distracted. Decide what you will do when quitting sounds reasonable. Pre-decisions remove emotion from the equation. And emotion is where discipline goes to die. Understand this deeply. You are not weak for feeling resistance. You are human. But you are powerful when you act anyway. Every time you do, something shifts internally. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. By the end of this stage, resistance won't disappear, but your relationship with it will change. You won't fear it. You won't argue with it. You'll simply move forward while it talks in the background. That's when transformation becomes inevitable. Not because it feels good, but because you no longer allow feelings to vote on who you are becoming. Momentum is fragile at first, and this is where most people either lock it in or lose it. The sixth shift is about protecting progress before it feels permanent. Early wins don't mean you're done, they mean you're vulnerable. Because success, even small success, tempts you to relax standards, and relaxed standards quietly undo growth. Here's the danger. You start to feel better, so you assume the system is working on its own now. You skip once. You adjust without intention. You tell yourself you've earned flexibility. That's not freedom, that's drift. And drift is how people slide back into old patterns without noticing. This week, your job is not to go faster, it's to go steadier. Momentum is not created by intensity, it's created by continuity. Showing up at 80% every day beats showing up at 100% once. Consistency compounds. Intensity burns out. There was someone who made incredible progress quickly, then lost it just as fast. Not because they failed, but because they stopped protecting the basics. They forgot that systems don't sustain themselves. They are sustained by respect. Respect for the process, respect for repetition, respect for boredom. Boredom is the next test. When improvement becomes less exciting, when the novelty fades, that's when identity is truly formed. Anyone can act when it's new. Very few act when it's normal. And yet normal is where results live. This is where discipline matures. It stops being emotional and starts being procedural. You don't need to feel proud to do the work. You don't need to feel inspired. You just follow the steps because that's what you do now. Pride comes later as a byproduct. Protect your momentum by keeping your rules simple. One focus, one standard, one finish line per day. Complexity creates loopholes. Simplicity creates execution. If you ever feel overwhelmed, you've added too much. Pull back to what matters most and lock that in. There's a powerful shift that happens here. You stop asking if it's working and start trusting the process. Trust doesn't come from blind faith, it comes from evidence. Each completed day becomes proof. Each kept promise strengthens belief. Understand this. You are not chasing a feeling, you are building reliability. Reliability creates confidence that doesn't disappear when conditions change. That's real strength. By now, something subtle is happening. Your self-talk is changing. You're no longer negotiating as much. You're acting faster. That's momentum taking root. Don't rush it, don't test it, protect it. Because once momentum stabilizes, transformation stops being something you push. It becomes something that pulls you forward, even on days when motivation never shows up at all. By the seventh phase, something important happens internally, even if no one else can see it yet. You begin to trust yourself again. And trust is far more powerful than confidence. Confidence depends on results. Trust depends on behavior. When you know you will show up regardless of mood, pressure loses its grip on you. This is where self-respect is rebuilt, quietly. Not through praise, not through validation, but through follow-through. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's inconvenient, you send yourself a signal, I can rely on me. That signal changes how you walk into rooms, how you speak, how you decide. Most people underestimate how much energy they lose by breaking promises to themselves. Each broken promise creates friction, doubt, hesitation, overthinking. But when promises are kept, energy returns. Decisions become cleaner. You move with less internal resistance because you're no longer fighting yourself. There was a moment when someone realized they no longer needed external motivation. Not because the work became easy, but because quitting stopped feeling like an option. That's not discipline, that's alignment. When who you are and what you do finally match, effort feels lighter even when the task is heavy. This is also where patience becomes critical. Results may still be invisible, no applause, no dramatic change yet, and that's exactly why this phase matters. You are learning to operate without immediate reward. And that skill separates those who change temporarily from those who change permanently. Understand this deeply. The world doesn't reward effort instantly, it rewards consistency eventually. If you need proof every day, you'll quit early. If you can work without proof, you'll last long enough to win. This week is training you to delay gratification. To do the work today for a version of you that doesn't exist yet, but is being built quietly through repetition. That future version is watching every choice you make right now. When doubt shows up, don't fight it. Let it speak while you keep moving. Doubt fades when ignored. Action starves it. The more you act, the quieter doubt becomes, until one day you realize it hasn't spoken in a while. By now, your routine feels less forced. Not easy, but familiar. Familiarity is powerful. It turns effort into rhythm. And rhythm is what carries you through hard days when strength runs low. This is the moment where many people slow down because they feel stable. Don't confuse stability with completion. You're not finished. You're established. And that's far more valuable. Because once trust in yourself is restored, no external circumstance can easily take it away. And when you trust yourself, you stop needing permission to move forward. This is where awareness sharpens. And you begin to notice things you used to ignore. The eighth shift is about environment, because willpower was never meant to fight surroundings alone. Your environment is always shaping your behavior, either by design or by default. If you don't choose it intentionally, it will choose for you. Look around your life honestly. What makes the wrong choices easy? What makes the right choices hard? That imbalance is not accidental. It's the silent force behind most failures. People blame themselves, but they rarely redesign their surroundings. And yet environment beats intention every time. This week, you are not trying to become stronger. You are trying to become smarter. Remove friction from good habits. Add friction to bad ones. If distraction is one click away, discipline has to work too hard. If focus is the default, discipline becomes unnecessary. There was someone who struggled with consistency until they stopped relying on memory and started relying on placement. Tools where they could be seen. Triggers placed deliberately, reminders built into the space. Nothing about them changed internally at first, but behavior changed immediately, and behavior repeated changed identity. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. Leaders don't test themselves unnecessarily. They design conditions where the right behavior happens naturally. You don't prove strength by resisting temptation constantly. You prove intelligence by removing temptation altogether. Environment is not just physical. It's digital. It's social. It's informational. What you listen to, what you scroll, who you allow to influence your thinking. Every input shapes your output, and if your inputs are chaotic, your results will be too. This week, audit your environment like a strategist, one change at a time. Silence one notification, remove one distraction, create one visual cue that reminds you who you are becoming. These small changes feel insignificant, but they work in the background, 24 hours a day. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your surroundings support you. You stop feeling like you're fighting the world. Instead, the world begins to work with you. That shift alone can double your consistency without increasing effort. Pay attention to this. When the environment aligns with your goals, behavior stops feeling heroic. It feels normal. And normal is sustainable. By now, you may notice something surprising. You're less tired. Not because you're doing less, but because you're wasting less energy resisting, deciding, and recovering from poor choices. Efficiency replaces exhaustion. This is not about control. It's about alignment. When your environment reflects your intentions, progress accelerates quietly. And this is how transformation becomes harder to reverse. Not because of motivation, but because your surroundings are now designed to support the person you've decided to be. At this stage, the change is no longer fragile, it's forming weight. The ninth shift is about pressure, because sooner or later life will test what you've built, not gently. Unexpected problems, delays, criticism, fatigue. This is where systems either hold or collapse. And this is where most people discover whether their transformation was real or rehearsed. Here's the truth, pressure does not create character, it reveals it. When things go wrong, you don't rise to your intentions, you fall to your preparation. That's why this week was never about perfect days. It was about building something sturdy enough to survive imperfect ones. There will be a moment when the routine is interrupted. Something doesn't go as planned, and the old version of you will try to speak again. Just this once. You've done enough. Handle it tomorrow. That moment is not a failure. It's an exam, and how you respond determines whether this change stays or fades. There was a time when someone faced a setback that would have derailed them before. Same problem, same pressure. But something was different. They didn't panic, they adjusted, they did what they could, not what was ideal, and that was enough. Because consistency under pressure builds belief faster than perfect conditions ever could. This is where flexibility meets discipline. Discipline says you show up. Flexibility says you adapt the form, not the commitment. You may shorten the work, but you don't skip it. You may slow the pace, but you don't stop moving. That distinction changes everything. Understand this. Missing once is an event. Missing twice is the beginning of a pattern. The goal is not to never miss. The goal is to never miss twice. Recovery speed matters more than perfection. Leaders don't avoid disruption. They recover quickly. This phase teaches resilience, not loud resilience. Quiet resilience. The kind that doesn't complain, doesn't dramatize, and doesn't quit. The kind that says, this matters enough to continue, even when it's inconvenient. By now, your relationship with failure is changing. You no longer see it as proof you can't do this. You see it as data, feedback, information to adjust the system. That mindset alone separates those who grow from those who repeat. Pressure will come, it always does. But now pressure works for you. It exposes weak points so you can strengthen them. It tests your identity so it can harden. You are no longer building motivation, you are building durability. And durability is what allows transformation to survive real life, not just ideal conditions. Now comes the final phase, the culmination of everything you've done over the past week. This is where transformation becomes visible, not because the world changes, but because you do. You are no longer negotiating with yourself. You no longer wait for motivation. You act because that is who you are now. Let's be clear. Change is not dramatic fireworks. It is subtle gravity. You carry yourself differently. Decisions are easier. Energy is cleaner. You don't need to prove anything to anyone because you have proven it to yourself. That internal authority is far stronger than external validation ever could be. This week, you've done something remarkable. You've designed systems, aligned behavior with identity, managed resistance, protected momentum, curated your environment, and learned to respond under pressure. 7 days of deliberate action have shifted the trajectory of your life. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but irreversibly. Think of the person you were a week ago, confused, frustrated, waiting for permission to start. Now, look at the person you are becoming, deliberate, focused, calm under pressure. That shift is invisible to some, but it is undeniable. The difference is not in one monumental action, but in thousands of small choices made consistently. Here's the ultimate insight. Transformation is not a goal, it is a process. And the process does not end in 1 week. But 1 week is enough to prove to yourself that you can lead your own life. That proof is contagious. It changes how you think, speak, and act. It changes the expectations you set for yourself. And those expectations, more than anything else, shape the future you will live in. From now on, every decision will feel lighter because you've trained yourself to act in alignment with your intentions. Challenges won't paralyze you. Discomfort won't derail you. Resistance won't control you. Momentum will carry you further than motivation ever could. Remember this, your past self didn't fail you. They were doing the best they could with the systems they had. But now, you've upgraded those systems. You've taken control of the first steps, the habits, the environment, the decisions. You've reclaimed authority over your life. So don't wait for another week to start again. Keep the framework. Keep the identity. Keep the momentum. Transformation is not a one-time event. It is a lifestyle. And once you see what 1 week of deliberate action can do, nothing will feel impossible anymore. Today, you are no longer the person who waits. You are the person who acts. You are the person who designs your own life. And that is where real power lies.